Welcome to Sports and Crypto. I'm your host, Ryan Cannon. On this program, I'll talk to industry leaders sitting at the intersection of sports and crypto to break down what is currently happening, identify trends, and delve into what they believe the future has in store for all of us. We'll hear about their career journeys, their lives, and we'll touch on some of their passions. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Jason Banks, welcome to Sports Crypto Podcast. Thank you for taking the time to do this, man. It's great to see you.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, look, we have known each other for quite a while, met in 2007. You were doing some work with American Express, I believe, at the time, working on their engagement in the PGA Championship. I was working at the PGA at the time, and we got to invent some new stuff around the 2008 PGA Championship and do some more after that for quite a while. And I always enjoyed, Jason, working with you because your approach and the way you think and the way you solve problems and focus on execution, but also you always had some instincts that I admired in that you were able to kind of interpret what brands and properties were looking for, and then bring that to life in the real world. And that's an art, I think, that has to be developed over time. So I want to get into that a little deeper, but first I'd love to kind of rewind and go back to, Jason Banks that has just graduated college, and kind of get a better sense for who that person was and how you got into the work professionally that you're ultimately doing, and then bring us all the way forward to kind of the work you're doing today.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting story. It's definitely not traditional by any means, but, I grew up in Ohio, went to high school in Cincinnati. And so I was about as far removed as you could be from kind of big city life, and, kind of having lived in New York City now for 22 years, it's hard to think about anything else, but it just wasn't really anything I ever thought of. But, as a kid, like growing up, the friends that I had, we just loved to create content. And it's kind of funny to think about it, because back then you had a VHS camcorder over your shoulder and that's what you were using versus, today everyone's got a phone. And so, it was a big deal when, one of our friends got that camcorder, saved up his money, went to Radio Shack and, picked that thing up, right? And so we were always building like storylines and creating stories. Like we had movies, and like our school projects were like movies, to the point where our teachers were like, "What are you doing? Like, this isn't the assignment." We're like, "Yeah, well, we wanted to tell a story about Prohibition by creating a movie called Gangland." And it was a 20-minute like biopic of just high school kids being ridiculous. And we probably
really,
but like, so early on, I guess where I go with that is like, I wanted to be on the creative side of things. I was an art kid. I was a little bit of an art brat, and I actually went to college on an art scholarship and wanted to focus on the design side of things. It was Ohio. My mom didn't want me moving to New York City. She was a little concerned about me going into the big city, right? But ended up kind of, just landing into this kind of corporate design world by happenstance. And I realized that, maybe long form content, movies and things like that weren't really my lane, but I like the idea of advertising in short form. And so I really tried to kind of pursue like a career in advertising at that point. And that's, how I got out to New York City, started at a big Madison Avenue agency, Young and Rubicam, working on brands like Sony and like the United Nations, and like even, Jell-O. Like as an intern, I had to deal with like Bill Cosby's writer, so there's some stories that kind of go with that, right? But yeah, I guess circumstantially, right? Like I grew up playing golf too, and that's how we kind of connected. And so I always kind of had a love for the sport and thought, being somewhat good, it would benefit me in the business world. And when I came to like Y&R, it didn't. I was like, I thought all these big New York, hotshots played golf, and like no one did. And so, somehow by way, I landed at an agency called Momentum a few years later, and I was hired there to do some entertainment marketing, experiential marketing with American Express. And, the way the story goes is that I was walking the halls and I saw these photos of Tiger and Pete Sampras and Venus Williams. And other athletes that Amex worked with. And I just kind of like asked the people who managed the place, like, what is all this? Like, oh yeah, we do all this stuff for Amex. And so, fast forward to 2006 and they were doing their deal with the USGA. And I kind of raised my hand and said, I know golf. Like, I'm not like a tour kid, but I know like the ins and outs of the game. And that's how I got into it. And so it all just kind of like took off from there. And, that's where we met. So I transitioned from kind of this creative side to the business side along the way, because I just wasn't making any inroads to it, and just ended up, where I am. And so, yeah, been a long slog, but it's taken me some interesting places.
So so first, is this movie available somewhere that was made in high school? Does this still exist?
It does on a VHS somewhere. Yeah, it's definitely not online.
We may need to resurrect this at some point and have a screening.
There's a handful of them. One of my friends was a little larger than most of us, and we had a very ill-fitted Batman outfit, and so he pushed himself into that outfit, and we had some pretty good times with a ill-fitting Batman costume and some kid running around town.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I didn't know that about you, Jason. The story that helps bring that layer of context definitely helps bring into perspective just kind of your storytelling approach. Like you do have that creativity inside you, and I think that does feel like something that informs your instincts. That's part of what you just had this sense about how to connect story with a real world application in a way that really resonated. So that does make sense. As working through with Momentum, doing the golf activation, and now you're with Wasserman, VP of brands at Wasserman. Tell me a little bit about kind of what you've been working on over there, and in particular, what you're working on here currently with FTX.
Yeah, sure. So Momentum was a very kind of eye-opening experience for me. One, I was still relatively young in the grand scheme of things. I had kind of these visions of going to grad school, doing the B school thing, kind of going to get the MBA route. And I remember kind of going through the application process, and, I got waitlisted to do a couple programs. I didn't do terribly great on the GMAT, but right in line with that, I got, this message from the guy who was running the place at the time that he was leaving. And he basically, like, the way I remember it, he came to like my cube and basically put the Tiger Woods contract with Amex on my desk and said, "This is yours." And so I was like, "Oh, all right, interesting."
All right.
So as a kid growing up playing golf, right, that was pretty wild. I had no idea what it meant. But, basically we built this opportunity with Tiger in 2007 around Oakmont, which you can find on YouTube actually. And I basically said, forget B school. Like, I'm going to work with Tiger. And I basically heads down into this space. And it all came from this point of like passion and interest in the vertical, and thinking like what would make it special for someone. And my time at Momentum, got close to like 9 years. And it was really about kind of growing that, kind of consumer experience. But what I started to really kind of gravitate towards was more towards the brand experience of like, why are they doing this? Like, why have a relationship with Tiger? Why have a relationship with the United States Golf Association or the, National Basketball Association? What makes a corporate organization want to invest in something like that? And so I decided I wanted to pursue that more than the executional side of things, because I felt you could influence how the execution went down more from that side, because you're setting the framework up for what was allowed. And I wound my way up to Wasserman because I built a lot of great relationships with the team at Wasserman. And before they were Wasserman, they were On Sport. They were partners of ours at Momentum with another agency, kind of working on Amex. And, my life kind of is a bit of circumstance. I got to New York by, a bit of luck, got to Momentum by a bit of luck. And I think, Wasserman came with a bit of luck as well. And just kind of the right circumstances falling into the right place at the right time. And so, it's been about 6 years now going into my time with Wasserman, and we focus more on the strategy side, I think, more than we do the executional side for brand clients. And we help the way, when friends ask, like, what is it that you do? Or if I try to explain it to my kids, it's like, if you see a name on something, sports wise, we're helping figure out what that name is. And so if you look at a patch, or if you look at a stadium, you look at a hat, and you see like a brand name on it, we're helping organizations figure out why they should do that, if they should do it, how much should they pay for it, and if they do pay for it, what do you do with it? And so, over the last 6 years with Wasserman, have had the fortune of working with a lot of really interesting and great brands, from the likes of like Samsung to American Eagle to Hulu, working with different properties, like a San Manuel Casino, helping Xbox. I mean, it just like runs the gamut, right?
Mm-hmm.
And all of them were trying to kind of solve a specific problem or a challenge for them, which was like, how do you take your brand and bring it to a consumer in a way where they're going to care about it? And we typically solve that through sports, entertainment, and culture. And so when, the FTX opportunity came up, they had a public, kind of RFP out for the business. And, we were fortunate enough to be awarded that. I was asked to help organize the team around it and run with it. And so now we're at the point where we're helping, a very young organization in the grand scheme of things, right? 3 years or so, for how long they've been around, navigate what they're doing in the sports world. And so they've established a lot of great relationships. A lot of them are very young and new relationships. And now we're just trying to work with their team there, an incredibly talented young group of people, on how to take them to market. And so when you see the FTX name on something sports related, we're trying to help them, figure out how to, get the biggest bang for their buck, if you will.
Yeah, it's fascinating, really fascinating work. And I want to go a little deeper with FTX on this here in a minute, but I want to take a step back. It's one thing if you're trying to kind of carry forward an established brand who the consumers and fans already have a feeling about that particular brand. It feels like it's something else when it's a new entity, and you're going to start, you're going to architect and try to architect anyway what and how people are going to feel about that particular organization. Where, kind of how do you measure all of this? If it's a well-established brand, are you looking at and tracking certain metrics and then, making changes along the way, or is it more visceral? Is it more, hey, we sit down and we start talking about these things with the client, and eventually a narrative emerges. And if that narrative it starts to feel good, like literally just feel good, you kind of can get that sense where, okay, I think we're on to something here. We're starting to get at the essence of what this is all about. And then you run with it. Like which one of those levers are you kind of revisiting the most, the measurement side, or does it really still just come back to, we're going to do what feels good, because that is ultimately, we need to be focused on the consumer having that same feeling?
Yeah, I think it's one of those questions where it depends, right? And so you look at the brand and where they are in their life story, kind of where they are in their kind of narrative and the arc around their narrative. An organization like an American Express or a Coca-Cola, you look at like any of the brands P&G, kind of puts out there, they're very well established brands, and they have a very, I think, well established kind of narrative that goes along with them. And so those brands will choose to pivot between kind of different aspects of, awareness, engagement, what have you, when it comes to going to market. And so you can take like an Amex and you can say, everyone knows what American Express is. You can take a Samsung and you can say, everyone knows what a Samsung is. But did you know Amex had this particular type of card? Did you know Samsung had this particular type of product? And so when you look at like those products, you have to look at what are the right ways to get people aware of what those products and or services are. And so we tend to take an approach that is one of like, where are you on that kind of arc? And based on where you are, and you can't really see it maybe, but I'm swinging my hands kind of like a pendulum. Where you are can fluctuate. It doesn't have to go from one to the other and you finish. It can go like, do we need to be more awareness driven or do we need to be more engagement driven? And based on like where you are, we have a way of qualitatively assigning like what type of assets you may need in a relationship. And so do you need to put your name on a stadium if you're American Express? Subjectively, you could probably say no, because everyone knows what American Express is. But if you go into a relationship with like the USTA, when people come on the grounds for the US Open, the tennis tournament every year, they need to know what American Express stands for, and therefore the types of programs you provide those fans and the types of access points you provide those fans help illustrate what an American Express is all about. And I think FTX, in my personal opinion, is at that kind of early stages of the kind of story arc for them, where they have to tell the world who they are and what they are. And even more so complicated is this layer of crypto and just the general educational gap that exists there. And so they've chosen to take an approach that you see in very public ways that is more entertaining than anything else. And so there is a little bit of it feels good, right? Because like Tom's funny, Tom Brady's funny, right? Larry David, that's all very humorous approaches versus what you see some other brands taking, which is very much go to the moon, conquer the world, right? Destiny awaits. And so like they're not there. You can tell by the creative they've put out that they want people to feel like this is an experience worth taking and something that can quite frankly be fun. And so part of, I think, where an FTX is and where we are in terms of trying to help them answer that question is, one, do people know what you do? Do people know who you are? And when you hear those letters, do they know what it is? But you have to quickly kind of help them understand how to use it, how to engage with it. So we have to kind of balance that, and we have to work with, their partners to make sure we have, pieces of the puzzle that address who are you, what do you do, and why does it matter? And then pieces of the puzzle that address like, well, how do you do it? How do I get involved? And if I want to be a part of it, what's in it for me? And so we can measure that both qualitatively and quantitatively. Some of the more creative stuff is visceral, right? But some of the more tactical, kind of practical applications of the sponsorship world that we work in get to be more quantitative in trying to help actually drive true measures of like awareness gains, user adoption, trading volume, right? You want people in the app using it. So we have to pull levers to, enable all of that.
So the deal was announced, I think it was in February, early February of this year.
Correct.
And I'm assuming kind of the conversations they had, a bake off with a number of different agencies that were in conversations, and ultimately Wasserman and the team was prevailed. Is what we're seeing today, like how much of that started to come to life, in some of those early discussions? Was it, did you walk into those early discussions with, hey, this is what we're feeling, and this is what resonates? Or is it more, what are you talking about? Like in that first get together, are you just asking questions, or are you like bringing to the table, this is what we see?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly starts with a lot of questions because you want to make sure you're answering, everything correctly. You don't want to make too many assumptions, but I think a lot of what you see in the marketplace, or at least what's been put out there, publicly, is very much what we came to them with. We basically came out of the gates, in February with a lot of stuff to do across any number of relationships that they have. But the most visible one was their relationship with Mercedes and its F1 team. And Miami was hosting its first F1 race ever. It was going to be this massive spectacle of an event. But as a team partner, we don't necessarily have rights to the race itself. And we needed to find another way to make our presence known in a market like Miami, where FTX is based, where they have a large investment with the Miami Heat and the FTX arena. And so like, it's kind of like that was their hometown in a way, right? Still is. So a lot of what we did in those early days was kind of selling the idea of what you could do around that race. And I think a lot of the ideas that we put forward in that initial conversation were what, people experienced on South Beach, that race weekend, which was 3 days of just like incredible programming, events, and activities that really helped drive home like what makes FTX special. And what makes, crypto such an interesting world and an interesting market. So that was kind of how it all came together, to be honest. And then we've just continued to kind of push and crank on any number of their relationships. Maybe the Heat can pull out a win tonight, but there's always the chance for a knock on wood, like an all FTX final with the Warriors and the Heat, who are two teams they partner. right? They've got Steph Curry and Udonis Haslem in the on the Heat side of things. So, we root for both, but there's a lot of stuff going on for sure, and a lot of what you see going on was built on the back of what that RFP wanted to see.
Yeah, no, I think it's I love the distinction you made with the approach. One approach is like we're going to the moon, but this is to try to bridge the educational gap. We're going to make it a little more approachable through humor, and then how that is just continues to carry through that overarching narrative. The Larry David spot is, I think, one of the best. That captures it all right there. I mean, that really grabs the sentiment and communicates it just masterfully as far as a narrative to make crypto, approachable and make a consumer want to learn more.
Yeah, for sure. Right. Like we weren't involved in that spot in creating that. That was, all credit to their comms team internally and to their creative agencies. But the whole premise there was like, it was just more entertaining and almost kind of had this kind of FOMO aspect to it, right? Where he's like, I'm not sure I want to be a part of this. Like, I don't know if I want to be a part of this. Well, don't miss out, right? Like you don't want to miss out on the next big thing. And they've carried that narrative through. And if you look at some of their earlier spots, it's always been, and I think you can see this if you watch it, it's just been very inviting. Like, the UN, are you in? Do you want to be involved in this? Like, come on in. Like it's here. We're here to help you understand this. And you certainly don't want to miss out on it. And then you can see with another one of their spots that they used another one of their agencies for, was the Steph Curry work where, it's about, not being an expert. Like you don't have to be an expert in crypto to take part in all of this. Like the whole reason a company like, FTX is around and what we see as their agency partner is to help make it easier to understand. You don't have to be, a, physicist or someone, in the PhD realm to understand like, what crypto is. And so that's what they, really aim to communicate through a number of their above the line work, TV commercials. And then we try to articulate that in what we do when we're working with any number of, sports properties.
Yeah, carrying that sentiment, through the execution. You touched on the F1 race in Miami, which the visuals, by all accounts, it was just incredible. Really, really spectacular execution there. Could you go into a little more detail around maybe choose one lane there and just dig in a little deeper tactically? Like, were there NFT projects that were done in partnership with the teams or any other of the kind of specific activations? I'd love to kind of get some of your insights on that lane.
Yeah. So what we see, the letters NFT have taken on a life of their own in the last 6 to 8 months. While not like a new technology, they've certainly gained a lot of steam over the last 3 quarters or so. And what you end up seeing is kind of different applications for the technology. And what we see and kind of how we see NFTs evolving, and we kind of hear this narrative in a lot of places, is the role of utility, right? In that they don't have to be these individual pieces of artwork that are highly scarce and highly valued. There's a role for those, and we had a role for that. But I think when we looked at the event itself, the weekend itself, and the people of Miami, how could we use, or at least what do we have at our disposal to give people the easiest way into the platform? And NFTs can serve that purpose, especially free ones, because you don't have to make them, millions of dollars. They don't have to be these highly scarce individual pieces of like digital art. They can just be something cool and fun that anyone can grab. And so we had that. We used an NFT as a way to access a upgraded experience on the grounds. And so anyone who had the NFT for the weekend was able to, get in quicker, like have access to other spaces, that folks didn't have access to, take part in activations, that others couldn't. The program was called FTX Off the Grid, and the Off the Grid OTG, NFT, which is still, I believe, in the platform, in the marketplace to grab, were just free to get. Right? It was just a cool little commemorative thing you could show people, but it actually served a purpose on site. Take that though, and you go down the scarcity route, and you go down kind of the world of highly valuable. We did a relationship with an artist, Mad Dog Jones, who's a pretty well known digital artist who's done a lot of work in the NFT space. Mercedes did a partnership with him and actually brought to life a number of very, very intricate one-of-one NFT pieces of artwork, and there were 3 of them. And each of those pieces tied back to a real life part of the race weekend experience. And you can go online, you can find all about this. It's all out there, right? And what we did was we auctioned the NFTs to go to charity. The funds went to charity, right? This wasn't money going back to any organization like an FTX or a Mercedes. And what they were doing was they were not only getting this piece of artwork, but they were getting 2 instances. They were getting the actual rear wing end plate, or the rear end wing plate, rear wing end plate from the actual F1 car raced during the Miami event. And so both Lewis's and George's car had these rear wings that were customized by Mad Dog, wild looking pieces of artwork. And the people who auctioned, went through the auction, highest bid, got the NFT, but also got the rear wing. And that's cool, right? But then we had the last piece. Mad Dog had customized a replica F1 car. And so a full size F1, vehicle, with the Mercedes livery and all that, and customized the whole thing. And someone walked home with that. And wow. I think it went for something like, maybe a little over $400,000.
Wow.
So that was a real world auction. And so we had this free to get NFT, right, that anyone could take advantage of. You didn't need any money to do it. All you needed was the FTX app. But then we had this high-end auction that lived on the NFT marketplace on FTX only. Wasn't at Sotheby's, wasn't at any of these other auction houses, right? It was only on FTX. And that was a completely different experience, but they were both NFTs. And then we continue to work with the Mercedes team and the team at FTX to have what are ongoing NFT releases, and there'll be one coming up for Monaco. There was a collection released during Miami, excuse me. There was, as the race circuit, as the schedule continues, we will drop new NFTs tied to ticket stubs. And so Monaco will drop one. We had one for Miami with Mad Dog, and you had one for Jeddah, and kind of the rest of the schedule that kicked things off with Imola and Bahrain. So we'll continue to do that. And so we had a really cool thing for Miami. We had a very exclusive kind of one-of-one thing with high value, with high, utility, going back to a charitable piece. And then we have this ongoing element of all of these NFTs that are, being released throughout the season. So that was one kind of way to look at, I think, the world of NFTs and kind of their practical application, and just the various ways that you can use them to appeal to not just the everyday user and the collector, but to the everyday fan, and you just kind of see how that plays out.
Sure. And then bring that, the nexus back to the FTX's NFT marketplace. To bring all of that together is that's a brilliant, it's just brilliant execution. And I noticed, Jason, in all of that too, at no point it didn't seem like you sat down and the question was, okay, how many millions of dollars can we make by selling how many NFTs? That wasn't at all the North Star in this conversation. It was much deeper, much more strategic. How can we leverage this technology to really deepen, someone's expression of fandom for whether it's, F1 or their experience or Lewis Hamilton and support of charity. It was just a broader approach that yielded that ultimate application.
Yeah, it was never a question. Even with the auctions and the floor price, we knew, the team at FTX knew with their experience, and I think we knew as kind of sports fans, that if you found the right people, the auction would be successful. And yeah, we were all kind of sitting around the computer collectively, in our own apartments and homes, slacking with each other, like, oh, there it goes again. Nope, there it goes. Yep, there it goes. Yep, still going. Right. And so, you could kind of see like the virtual gavel kind of waiting to go down. And yeah, it was a pretty wild experience. But yeah, this wasn't about, who could kind of sell the most. It was about showing fans that this technology actually could serve a purpose. And you didn't have to have, millions of dollars to be a part of it. Sure, the collectible piece of it was big, but the off the grid stuff that we did was more about everyday access. And I think I wouldn't be surprised if you continue to see more of that in the marketplace, whether it's a crypto brand or a non-crypto brand trying to kind of understand how they can leverage, any sort of kind of blockchain-based technology, NFT being the most tangible at the moment, to, kind of create these Web3 experiences for their customers. So yeah, probably more to watch in that in the future.
Yeah, it seems like, over the longer arc, that is going to be the winning strategy. But it's such an interesting time. I mean, we're so early days with all of this. It's funny, we were talking about back in the early days when the relationship with FTX was finalized. I mean, that was just a little over 3 months ago. But it does it feels like another days, right? It feels like a lifetime ago. Crypto time is like dog years. It goes by fast. It's just absolutely fascinating. What else? Like, as you look, Jason, you're right at the nexus here. You're right at the intersection of where blockchain and sports meet, and you're one of the thought leaders that are bringing, the execution to life. I got to believe that's a lot of fun. We're all the hard problems. The answers to all the hard problems have yet to be created, and you're literally creating those as you go forward. And I imagine that's just knowing you. I know that those kind of things you enjoy, and you're good at it. Like, what do you, as you are looking out, the next 3 months, the next 6 months, is there anything you can disclose that you're kind of working on that would be, to the next iteration here as we go forward?
Yeah, I mean, we've got a ton of people, a ton of talented people around us, like kind of helping think about this stuff. We've got, teams over in the UK and in the US who are, set up to just dedicate their time on something like this. And so I don't know, like, I honestly don't know what it's going to look like in 6 months, because to your point, like, a lot of this is being written as we go. And I can't say what we did at Miami this year is going to be the blueprint for next year, because we don't know what the community may create. I think a lot of what, FTX and others in the space are building is still so new that it's hard to say, what will be kind of the next big thing. NFTs weren't here, 6-8 months ago in the way they are now. And so it's hard to say that type of acceleration of innovation won't continue in the space. So there's so many applications to it. I think from just a sports standpoint, whether it be ticketing or contracts, and these are things you hear people talk about, right? Like smart ticketing, smart contracts, basically anything that needs to be kind of a unique asset that can live on the blockchain, which is what an NFT effectively is, can translate in a lot of different ways. Whether that is a blockchain-based loyalty program, which is that once you have an NFT, we have a way to continue kind of rewarding people with things and dropping things, right? To athletes using contracts, right? To smart contracts, that is, and memorabilia. And so there's a lot of like practical applications to it. It's just a matter of who's going to be the first to go out there and actually kind of do something with it. At the end of the day, the adoption is still relatively low. We need to accelerate that and get more people involved to see the true value of it. Make sure they feel like it's safe and it's inviting to come in. And, from our standpoint, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of reasons to get involved. And yeah, the next 6 months, tough to say what it'll look like or what we have kind of coming out. But I can assure you it's going to be interesting when we figure it out.
Yeah, no doubt. Like if you had to, not to put you on the spot, and while this is being recorded, we're not gonna hold you to it. But when do you think we kind of cross that adoption chasm? You know, from early adopters to the till we start to get into the majority. Are we 2 years out, 5 years out? You know, longer, shorter? Like, what's your sense of the timeline to where the UX evolves enough that it just the onboarding is easier and faster, and people really start to uptake wallets and the technology?
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like it's unfortunately, I feel like it's a little longer out than we probably want it to be. I think there's a number of factors that probably play into that, including like the regulatory environment that we see around, you know, kind of crypto in general, and what, you know, FTX is doing kind of publicly to advance that is pretty obvious if you follow it. But you know, I think, you know, I saw a really interesting kind of thought piece on you know, crypto not too long ago, and it talked about just kind of this like innovation cycle that it tends to go through, and it's usually driven by, you know, a lot of interest in what's you know what the masses are kind of looking at. And so what the way that it goes is that it's like this, there's this kind of like price movement on the token side of things, right? And so as price increases, interest increases. And as interest increases, like new ideas start to evolve. And as these new ideas evolve, new startups emerge and new projects emerge. And there's a couple of these cycles that have taken place, I think, in the crypto markets since like kind of the inception of the whole kind of Bitcoin, you know, concept. And you look at like 2008, obviously when it started, but you obviously look at back at like, you know, 16 and now, and we're probably kind of going back through this kind of phase where price is driving all the conversation. And as price starts to move in another direction, right, and starts to kind of like go back up, you'll see interest in the public domain start to increase, and then like I think new ideas will emerge, right? Like where a product like Solana was, you know, quite some time ago is not where it is today, obviously, and the role that it plays in the NFT marketplace, you know, wasn't what it was a while ago, but it took all this interest to kind of drive that and to bring it to where it is. And I'm certainly no expert in that particular space, but it rings true for someone like myself who's still in the grand scheme of things a relative novice in this world, but that you can see why new projects kick up, because out of nowhere, all of a sudden, like this kind of germination of collective thinking kind of brings these new ideas to the table, these new ideas to the marketplace. And it takes some of what we've gone through recently in terms of like the price declines that many have seen and have noted to spur this thinking, to be like, all right, where do you go next?
Yeah.
And you just look at like where Luna went, and like with like the burn, and like everyone all of a sudden came together. And instead of like mourning the loss, which I'm sure a lot of people were quite, you know, kind of frustrated with, the community quickly pivoted to like, well, where do you go from here? What is that new idea? And so I think you'll continue to kind of see that cycle. And is it going to be a 2, 3, 5 year cycle? Tough to say. But I think you'll see continued kind of like adoption of the ideas. Properties will continue to kind of release thinking, and others will follow suit where they see others kind of going. And what I mean by that is like, you know, Red Bull, you know, the racing team, just announced today that they're releasing their own NFT collection at Monaco this weekend, following suit, you know, what FTX and Mercedes has done. And so, you know, innovation breeds innovation, creativity breeds more creativity. So I think you'll see others kind of like, you know, follow suit. But I think like a good marker is like when you see a kind of a mainstream organization announce an NFT, is like, what is the comment? What do the comments say? And so far, a lot of the comments are like, not again. Like, why? Right? The people who love it stay away. They're like, yeah, I got it. I know what this is. But the haters love to come in and just kill it. And so I think a good marker is maybe looking at kind of when a Coachella announces, you know, their NFT collection, or when Red Bull announces their NFT collection, how many haters come out of nowhere and like just kind of like just feed into it versus like, oh, this is cool. And yeah, I feel like we're probably a few years off from that.
Yeah, it's fascinating, right? It definitely appears as though the belief that blockchain technology has incredible potential, it definitely has a toehold, right? And that toehold is very firm. And as we watch, the arc going forward and adoption and sentiments kind of going up and down, but it's definitely going up and to the right over time. And the other thing that'll be kind of with that, as you were kind of indicating, is watching the vocabulary, the language evolve around these various products that, rather than NFT, which has like a really, tech heavy kind of sentiment, watching what does that evolve at some point, that'll probably evolve into some other very consumer facing, nomenclature, so that those comments, there won't be that association with some of these early days.
Digital collectible is something that you see.
Right.
So 100 Thieves created the gaming team, esports, created this like digital chain, a championship chain, right? And it was an NFT, but they didn't use those letters. They just used collectible, right? And so that was meant to basically appeal to people who are turned off by the terminology because they associate it with a picture of a Bored Ape or, a pixelated drawing that they think like a 5-year-old can do. And so they intentionally distanced themselves from that by using different terminology. But at the end of the day, it's the same thing.
Yeah, the underlying technology's there, but language is a powerful thing. Well, Jason, look, I could monopolize your whole day going deep. I know you don't have anything else to do today.
This is great. I love it.
But I really, for episode 2, I'm so grateful that you agreed to do this. I really enjoy our conversations. You just have a way. Like I said, I admire the way you think. It's evident that you care about what you do, but you also you have this just really unique intuition about how to create story and then bring that story to life and bridge that gap, and you're really effective at it. So in my opinion, you're one of the thought leaders in this space, and one of the people, because I know you're so talented, that make me bullish about this entire ecosystem and that it's only going to continue to move forward. So
thank you for that.
I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. And so we'll have to reconvene hopefully again here in person someday with golf clubs. That's a whole nother conversation too, by the way. Given your background in the game and passion for golf, I'd love to maybe at a future time we get back together and talk about how blockchain ultimately kind of flows through the golf ecosystem as well. I think there's a lot of untapped opportunity there.
A lot of good people doing stuff in the space. I tell you, I think every kind of industry, every kind of vertical in the sports space, someone's thinking about it. I mean, we talk about different examples in different spaces, and it's like, I wouldn't have thought it's gotten there yet. But sure enough, it has, right? And so that just shows you how much opportunity there is out there for it, because people are thinking about it, right? Like it's unlikely it hasn't been considered at this point. Just a matter of how far along it is. So thank you for giving me the forum to have the conversation. I think what you're trying to start here and what you're doing is tremendous, and it's a great opportunity to get a lot of interesting kind of thoughts out there about this particular world, which everyone as we see, is still very much learning a ton about it. So thanks for the audience, and good luck doing more of these, because I'm sure there'll be more.
No, I hope so. I appreciate it. I'm having a blast. I get to have learn 10 new things a day and have conversations with interesting people all day long. So I'm having a lot of fun with it. But all right, Jason, again, thanks again, and hope to see you soon.
Have a good one. Good talking to you, man.